Hello, this is the FCI Podcast. I am Attila Márton, and my guest today is Sam Gaines, who is head of the Companion Animal Science and Policy Department at the RSPCA and one of the Society's dog welfare specialists. She's the Society's technical lead on a variety of issues that affect dog welfare, including breed-specific legislation, racing greyhounds, and breeding practices. She manages a team of behavior and welfare specialists who lead improvements in companion animal welfare through corporate and government policy change and behavior change. Sam is also the secretariat of the Anti-Breed Specific Legislation Coalition Group in the UK, comprising Battersea, Blue Cross, British Veterinary Association, Dog Trust, RSPCA, and the Kennel Club. And our topic today is one of the most known breed-specific legislation matters, which is present in many countries. And it is the topic of dangerous breeds and putting a ban on certain breeds to reduce the number of dog attacks. And let's start with a basic definition, which may be simple. When can we call a dog dangerous? When can you label a dog as dangerous?
So, hi, I think it's just really difficult. I think that various people have tried to define dangerousness and attribute dangerousness to particular dog breeds. And as you know, in the UK, we have 4 types of dogs that have been added to our Dangerous Dogs Act under breed-specific legislation. And so obviously they are legally defined as dangerous, given the fact that they were originally selected as fighting dogs. But ultimately, as far as the RSPCA and other organisations are concerned, any dog has the potential to use aggressive behaviour and behave dangerously. And so actually labelling certain types of dogs as being dangerous is really in itself very dangerous. We end up in a situation where we have the public being misled that certain types of dogs, because they've been labelled as being dangerous, are therefore inherently aggressive, and that any other dog that's not on that list is therefore safe. And I think that a big concern is that almost like legitimizes certain high risk behaviors towards dogs, and that if you're a Labrador or you're a Jack Russell or you're a Chihuahua, I can do anything I like with you because you're not dangerous. But I can't do that with a Pit Bull Terrier, a Japanese Tosa, or any of the other dogs that are listed. So I think we've got to be really, really careful with labelling any dog as being dangerous. And particularly now, I guess our understanding around dog behaviour and welfare has advanced hugely in the past 30 years since we've had the Dangerous Dogs Act here in the UK. And we know now that aggressive behaviour is not this single trait that is inherited. It's so much more complex than that, and that whether or not a dog chooses to use aggressive behaviour is so dependent upon how they've been bred, what their rearing experience has been, and also what their lifetime experiences have been as well. So it's, what is it that the dog has learned through potentially using an aggressive response that may well then condition and reinforce that behaviour further. So I think for us, any dog has that potential to be dangerous, because any dog has the potential to use aggressive behaviour and to bite. I mean, it is, after all, a normal behavioural response to a situation that a dog invariably feels threatened or perhaps is in pain. And if we don't respond to the signals that they give us accordingly, then obviously they're put in a position where they have to escalate. And that does and can result in aggressive behaviour and dangerousness.
And the next question, just based on what you just said, that if a dog bites someone, either another dog or a human, is that dog dangerous all the time? Can we just say that dog is dangerous based on one situation? I just want to present that this is not that simple as it seems, that one dog attacks another dog or a human. We automatically call it a dangerous dog in many cases.
Absolutely.
What is the situation?
Yeah, and over years we've seen people label dogs as aggressive dogs. We've seen it even within the rescue sector as well. Dogs will have come in known to have bit somebody or bitten another dog, and then they're labelled as an aggressive dog. We now know that aggressive behaviour is very context specific. You can't just label a dog as human aggressive, dog aggressive. It is very much around context, situation and circumstances. And so you may have a situation where it's very unique, in which the dog at that time felt that using aggressive behaviour was the appropriate response to tackle that particular situation. But if that situation doesn't occur again, they may never feel that they need to use aggression. So I think, it's not helpful, and indeed very problematic, to suggest that a dog is aggressive or is dangerous. It's, dogs will use aggressive behaviour in particular contexts. So we can't say, for example, that dogs are naturally aggressive or inherently aggressive. And this is where part of the problem has been with breed-specific legislation, that we have seen various governments add particular types of dogs to breed-specific lists because there is this belief that something about them makes them inherently aggressive. So if we talk about, fighting dogs, because in the UK we have the pit bull terrier as one of our prohibited breeds, that dog originally was selected as a fighting dog, and so over a period of time we have selected for attributes that both physically and behaviourally, if enhanced through training, actually put that dog in a good position to be able to behave well in that particular behaviour. So, we've selected for dogs that are strong, are muscly, have got powerful jaws, and obviously when they're then trained to fight, that does put them in a good position to be successful at that particular behaviour. But it doesn't mean that they are naturally aggressive or inherently aggressive. What we know around breed traits is that they give us a good idea of how a dog might behave, but they can't tell us how that dog is guaranteed to behave. So, you can have a dog that perhaps has been selected to perform a particular behavior. And I always talk about Labrador retrievers, because we always think that, Labradors are going to be great retrievers, but you find Labradors that don't retrieve. So, we have to again think about, these are probabilistic traits that we're talking about, not deterministic. And so again, it's about thinking that it's about the labels, isn't it, that we're giving to dogs, and that we can't just label a dog as being inherently aggressive.
And Labradors, I'm really happy that you mentioned Labradors for the second time, because when I check lists of lists based on statistics related to dog attacks, number of dog attacks, and you often see Labradors at the top 10 list of breeds related to the number of dog attacks. I sometimes saw such statistics from the USA, and people would think that a Labrador is a family dog. It loves children, etc., etc. And I think it perfectly shows what you said at the very beginning, that if you think that does not belong to then you don't need to take care about how you approach the dog, how you socialize the dog, etc., etc. And it probably leads to further problems within the family. So I think this kind of perception, what we think about certain breeds and what we think about the behavior of dogs, how behavioral problems develop, and what our duty in this, I mean, to properly socialize a dog, to train a dog, to teach our kids to behave with the family dog is really important. So it is a really complex topic. But what I want to ask first, as you mentioned, there are some countries where breed-specific ban has been used for some years, or maybe decades now. Is there any change in the number of dog attacks? Was it effective at all?
So there's been a whole range of studies that has looked at whether or not targeting particular types of breeds does actually better protect public safety. And the research suggests that actually targeting certain types of dogs is not effective. And, it goes back to what we've been saying in terms of that, breed is just, it isn't a good predictor of risk. So it doesn't help us predict which dogs are more likely to display aggressive behaviour. So, it's because it just is so much more complex. And there's been some really interesting research that came out of the States a few years ago that was looking at the factors that were involved with a range of fatalities. So they looked at 256 different fatalities and the factors that co-occurred around that. And what they found there was that actually it's not about breed, it is about the way in which dogs are managed and different impacts that we have as humans on their behaviour. So typically what was found was that dogs that weren't treated as a family pet but instead were kept outside but had been abused, misused, neglected, were much more likely to be involved in these fatal incidents. And so that's it is part of the problem, that at the moment that whilst we've got BSL, people are very, very focused on breed being the issue. But certainly what we are seeing as well is where in certain countries, like, for example, we've seen studies coming out of Italy, Spain, Germany, lots of studies coming out of the United States. There is now, thankfully, this progressive trend away from BSL because the research is showing us that focusing on breed is not effective. And actually what we really need to do if we want to prevent dog attacks and we want to promote responsible dog ownership, we have to be looking at fostering really good relationships with people in the community and educating them around not just being safe around dogs, but like what you were saying, it's very much around that responsible acquisition. It's how we rear dogs, it's how we control them when we're out in public, and making sure that we have a really good understanding around behaviour. And I just wanted to go back to a point that you made around Labradors, just to unpick that, because I think, again, it leads nicely into what we've just been saying, that Labradors obviously are hugely popular. They're the second most popular breed in the UK. And so it therefore makes sense that you might actually be more likely to get bitten by a Labrador. So that's often why they come quite high up on that top 10 list. But this again is where we have problems, because we don't have, at least in the UK, reliable dog bite data. And this was something that's been found in a recent report that I know we're going to talk about a little bit as well. But that's absolutely crucial, because at the moment we're making decisions around dogs, and certain countries are adding particular types of dogs onto lists of prohibited breeds based on what is very skewed science. So, in this country, we don't have reliable data. We don't even know accurately what our population of dogs is. We don't know how many dogs we have within a particular breed, and we don't know the number of dogs that are involved in dog bites. So without all of that information, we can't come up with breed-specific bite rate data, which is actually what you would need to do if you really were going to try and tackle the number of dogs that are most likely to be involved in dog bites. But even where we have that data, and we've seen this come out of other countries, what that data shows is that you would have to take out a significant number of dogs to prevent either one bite from occurring, or even more dogs to prevent a fatality. And actually what that would then mean, if we were looking at the data that you just spoke about with Labradors, you'd have to take, if you wanted to stop Labradors being involved in bites, you'd have to remove tens and tens of thousands of Labradors from the population, which just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But this is what we're applying through BSL at the moment. So it for a whole host of different reasons, BSL just doesn't make sense, not least because of the fact that there isn't that evidence there to underpin it. There just isn't robust scientific evidence. We can cherry pick data, and we can look at some of the dog bite data that is available in pockets of the UK, but ultimately when you look at it and you apply very robust, rigorous science, there isn't the evidence there to underpin a breed-specific approach to public safety.
And as you mentioned previously, besides we don't have appropriate statistics for decision-making, legislative decision-making, we have a huge amount of scientific studies related to dog behavior to prove that aggressiveness, for example, is not that simple, not just that simple that, okay, this dog belongs to that breed and that's why it is aggressive. Because aggressiveness is a huge topic within dog ethology. Why a dog attacks another person, another people, or another dog. It has a lot of different kind of reasons, causes, and just simply developing a behavioral problem. It takes a lot of things. I mean, uh, the early life experience, the genetic background, uh, the experience later the dog collects in the environment where it lives. So it's not that simple that you could pick up one label and you say that if a dog belongs to this, it will be dangerous or non-dangerous. So statistics would be really important for decision making. But I think it is obvious recently that we know a lot about the behavior of dogs and why they develop a kind of behavior which seems to be dangerous for us. And in many cases it is, because if a dog kills, for example, another dog, it is something that we want to avoid in the future.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's, you're so right in terms of that. It is so complex, because we've obviously got aggressive behavior that is motivated by underlying emotional states. So, we see dogs that, particularly when they get that bit older, may become in pain through arthritis or other orthopedic conditions or skin conditions, something like that, then can lead to aggressive behaviour in a dog that may never have used aggressive behaviour previously. So, it is very much for them part of their behavioural response, as we've said, to certain situations. But we also see, predatory behaviour that is often labelled as aggressive behaviour, where we will have individual dogs that, we'll see some, a smaller animal or even in some cases smaller children or babies, and, see them as prey. And so, so much, it does just become so much more difficult. And, you really need a lot of information to be able to determine what it is that is motivating that dog's behaviour. As you say, it's not really simple and straightforward. It's not enough for us to say that dog behaves like that because he is this particular breed. And I think, we have to have legislation that reflects that complexity. And certainly in the UK, what we want to see is legislation that allows enforcing officers to act much earlier than what is currently the case. So, we want the ability for people that may have concerns around dogs in their community, that may be showing slightly concerning behaviour towards other dogs, other animals, other people, for them to have the ability to raise that with someone who has the right knowledge and the right qualifications and the right experience, to actually be able to go and speak to that person and put in place suitable and appropriate interventions that will stop that behaviour from escalating. Because I think it is fair to say, that there are some situations that genuinely come around because of accidents and through ignorance, people not necessarily, unfortunately, understanding what behaviours dogs find threatening. It's like we will often, and I think it becomes particularly prevalent and prominent when we start to talk about children and dogs, the way in which children want to express their love towards their family pets is not something that is natural to a dog. And I think for dogs, having children running around, screaming, shouting, kissing, hugging is actually really quite threatening for a lot of dogs. But not everyone who has a dog and a child in their family will fully understand that and appreciate that, and certainly won't be looking out to see how their dog is responding when that sort of behaviour is happening, and won't be taking the necessary steps to prevent their dog from becoming worried and possibly on occasion being in a situation where they feel so threatened that actually the only thing that they can do is be more overt in their behaviour and perhaps snap or growl, or in some worst cases bite. So I think, again, there's a lot that's really needed around education as well, so that people fully understand the dog that they have in their home, and that they're not little people, they're not wolves, they are dogs, and we need to understand dogs, and we have to be able to think how they're thinking to make sure that they're not put in these situations where they feel really threatened.
We're really happy that you came up with this, because I want to refer back what you said about recent studies showing that those dogs which are kept outside, not treated as family members, not that socialized, that tend to attack more in many cases, which is logical. But now you mentioned the another part of the spectrum, when we neglect we neglect how a dog behaves, because it's not a wolf, it's not a kid, it's not another kid with 4 legs, etc., etc. Because in my opinion, this is also a problem recently with dog behavior, that it is actually it is really trending to keep dogs. Even without the pandemic, dogs are fantastic creatures. We know that there are a lot of lonely people living on their own in the world, especially in bigger cities, and for them it is really good to have, for their mental health, to have a companion, to have a dog as companion. And it is also a trend to keep and to label a dog as family. And I think, and this is my personal point of view, that sometimes if you don't make a difference between the human needs and the canine needs of a species, then you will make a huge mistakes, because you will choose a dog, for example, which temperament will not really fit into your everyday life, or will not fit your personality. You will fail, for example, conduct a proper, not professional in that way, but a proper training period for the dog, to understand the body language of the dog, because you really forget that this is a dog, it is not a baby, and you should do that differently. And after a while, I think many people realize that okay, there is a kind of problem in the behavior, and depending on a lot of factors, that dog can be dangerous, because as you said at the very beginning, all dogs can bite, and there's always the potential in this.
Yeah, I think there's a real balance, isn't there? Because I think, I guess my personal view is that I feel it's actually quite important for us to think and to talk about dogs as being part of the family, because of what we were saying earlier, that, you know, if they're not part of the family and they're on the periphery, you've got that danger of their welfare needs not being provided for. And I think that is absolutely key. You know, we want to make sure that dogs are given the things that they need, that is going to keep them physically healthy and psychologically fulfilled. And, you know, that in itself is a really good step forward to prevent them from feeling they have to use aggressive behaviour. But it can go too far, as you say, and you can then end up with people that don't think about dogs from their perspective, but are thinking of them through their own experiences and their own eyes. And I think it becomes very, very difficult, and is something that we talk about as critical anthropomorphism. So I think it's actually not too dangerous about putting ourselves in the shoes of our dogs, but so long as it's within the scope of what is actually realistic and accurate for that particular dog, so that we're not attributing, for example, emotional states that dogs are unlikely to be able to experience, but not forgetting, you know, that dogs do experience a range of emotions, and, you know, they can experience happiness, they can experience sadness, they can experience love, pain, all of those different things that we are responsible for ensuring they have that ability to experience as well. And I think it's also as well about not forgetting that through the selection and the domestication of dogs into our homes, we've made a very sociably flexible animal. So we can provide the companionship and the bond that dogs would ordinarily get from other dogs. So we can step in. So I think it's, again, that in itself is quite important as well, because we fulfill a very significant role for dogs, and we have to remember all of that. So I think, you know, it's, I guess ultimately, however we label dogs, whether we want to label them as companions, as pets, as family members, what we can't do is forget about what a dog is. And I think ultimately it's like, what do we need to provide to make sure that our dogs are happy and healthy? And if we're putting all of those things in place, then actually I have, I guess, probably less of a concern about what we attribute to them in terms of a label.
Yeah, I think first of all, I think you mentioned the word balancing, to find a balance between the things. And I think this is the key in not just in keeping a dog properly and responsibly, but in many areas of our everyday life. And sometimes I see this as a problem when people decide, first of all, if they decide to start to keep a dog, and when they decide that, okay, I would like to have that dog just because. I recently had a story with a friend who has no experience with dogs, but he saw a photo of a Cane Corso, and he decided to start to keep that dog because it looked really powerful and masculine and manly. And this friend, he has 2 kids, 2 boys. I think one is around 8, the other one is around 12 years old. He seldom at home because of work, so he decided to keep a Cane Corso, and he asked me where he could find a good dog representing this breed. And luckily, it didn't take too long to tell him to change his mind, and he luckily changed his mind. So I think this is also an important aspect of properly choosing a dog as well, because if you don't have the routine, if you have no clue, many cases start to keep a dog without real knowledge on how to keep a dog, how to start to keep a dog as well. And I think it also leads to many kind of problems related to behavior or even dog attacks.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, it's absolutely, isn't it, in terms of when people are thinking about getting a dog, it's doing all of that research beforehand and working out, you know, what dog is likely to be compatible with their lifestyle. And I think, you know, as we were saying at the beginning, for me, that someone with a family saying they wanted to get a big dog like that wouldn't be setting alarm bells, because I'd be thinking, oh, actually, is that dog likely to be more aggressive, for all the reasons we've just gone through. But Cane Corsos are big, strong, powerful dogs. So, you know, you have to be aware of that, don't you? And I had a 40-kilogram Labrador cross Mastiff when my daughter was born, and he was incredibly good-natured, but he would quite regularly knock her over. So for us, that was a bit of a concern. And obviously we had to be incredibly careful when we were watching them interact together as they grew up, because he was so big. Having said that, I've now got a 7-kilogram Bichon Frise cross who is so much smaller, but I still spend as much time observing her with my daughter as what I did with my daughter and our bigger dog, because ultimately I do not want my daughter to be put into a situation where she is at risk, regardless of the size of the dog. And I also don't want my dog to be in a situation where he's feeling really uncomfortable, really threatened, and he can't get away. He doesn't have choice and control over what he wants to do with that interaction. So, you know, I think again, it's I guess there's that danger, isn't there, of people thinking about, I won't get this breed, I'm going to get this breed instead. But it's still remembering that regardless of the breeds that you're getting, you have to be very, very careful around how you behave towards dogs, because and I don't say that to be sensationalist or scary, but I think it's also, it comes around from an understanding of respecting dogs as well, that there are just some things that dogs do not like and some things that dogs find threatening. And actually, in order for us to ensure that they are comfortable with us and happy with us, and that we don't compromise that relationship that we have to recognise what those interactions are that dogs don't like, and then avoid them. And I think that's what's really, really key. It's about, you know, us understanding the impact of our behaviour on dogs as well.
Am I right? Okay, you mentioned that education is key, and cooperation with dog keeping societies is the solution, not bans and the current style of legislations. Am I right if I say that we should develop a more detailed perspective about dogs and responsible dog ownership? Because it seems that we learned a lot of things about dog behavior, what needs dogs have, and we should catch up. I mean, dog keepers, dog owners should catch up with this to have a slightly different angle, looking at the dogs, what they need, how to keep them, how to raise them, how to train them. If we perceive a kind of behavioral problem, how to fix them. Can it be the solution for reducing dog attacks?
Yes, I mean, I think that, certainly if we look at what's happening in the United States, as I said, there is that progressive trend now away from BSL, and instead it is about, I guess, fostering and encouraging responsible dog ownership in the community instead. And a really good example of where this has happened is Calgary in Canada. So in Canada, in Calgary, they have what's called a responsible pet ownership bylaw. And if you are a dog or a cat owner, you have to have a license in order to be able to own either of those species. So when it actually comes to dogs, they basically have to have a license that then sets out 5 different principles around ownership, which includes things like how you buy responsibly or you acquire responsibly, how you care for that dog, and how you control that dog, recognizing that you are responsible for controlling your dog and their behavior towards people, other animals and other dogs, etc. And what has been shown within Calgary is that has had a real impact on dog bites. So they haven't had BSL, but they've got low numbers of dog bites, and they've seen very high compliance rates with the dog licensing. They also see very high compliance rates with neutering, vaccination. When dogs get lost, and same for cats, the reunification process is very swift as well. And I think, what's really good about this particular scheme, and what we've urged the UK government to look at it, is because the money that comes in from that licensing scheme is then ploughed back into the community. So it benefits dog owners by, for example, making sure that there are services that dog owners require, like dog wardens, for example, but it also benefits other people in the society who are affected by dog owners. So it pays for education programs in schools. It also provides for other initiatives. And I think that is something that becomes really, really key, because you have people that are paying towards being a dog owner. And I don't think we should be seeing this as a tax. I think, we have to recognise that if we are taking on dogs, we have a responsibility. And actually, does it not make sense that the money that comes from that then goes back into the community to actually foster that sort of idea that everyone is responsible for their dog, and we all have a responsibility in terms of how we behave towards dogs as well. But we can only do that if we get the right education or other interventions, and that's what this scheme allows. So this is absolutely what we're seeing instead. There's a brilliant short book out by a lady called Janice Bradley, who has looked at effective dog control policies. And she's done a whole lot of research looking at different policies, and that's come out very, very strongly as showing that it's exactly this sort of scheme that is effective at protecting public safety. So you're definitely seeing a reduction in dog bites, because you are obviously changing people's behaviour towards dogs, but you are also putting in place the measures that are necessary to actually intervene at an early stage and stop more serious incidents from happening by getting in really early and working with the owner and allowing them to take action to actually address what's causing the dog's behaviour in the problem in the first instance. And I think that's what's absolutely key. It is that focus on early intervention, prevention and education, and it's absolutely what we want to see in the UK as well.
I think this licensing system comes up in many countries as an idea, or in excuse me. I think in Switzerland maybe they have something similar related to dogs, and I'm sure that many problems occur because not just dog attacks. Many problems occur because people start to keep animals without the proper and the minimum knowledge related to the species, and not because they are evil or they want to do something bad, but usually if you don't know something, if you don't have the knowledge about something, you also don't know that you should have that knowledge. And that's why I think education strategy is key, to give the chance to people to educate themselves, to know what they don't know, because it is vital. And dogs are very complex species. If we talk about behavior, nutrition, etc., 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 and yes, in case of dangerous breeds, to have banning as the only preventive strategy is not good. We need law enforcement for certain cases, of course, but to trust in legal measures as the only solution and the only tool for conducting change is, I think, it is not working. As you said, in those countries where certain breeds are banned, it's not effective because that is not the cause of the problems, because it's much more complex topic. And you mentioned that we will talk about the research. It was issued in the UK 21, if I'm right, and it is absolutely an independent report related to the topic how to reduce the number of dog attacks. It focuses on the UK. I read the whole report. It is long, but it was very good. The nature of the problem. Could you tell us a bit more?
Yeah. So the report was commissioned by the UK government in 2018, and this was basically linked to an inquiry that had happened earlier in that year that was very much looking around dangerous dogs, and had originally been set up to look at the effectiveness of breed-specific legislation in protecting public safety and its impact on dog welfare. And shortly after, I think it was around the same time that this research was commissioned with Middlesex University. So they were asked to look at different factors in reducing dog attacks, but also promoting responsible dog ownership as well. So they did a whole series of stakeholder interviews, looked at a range of different sources of information, including the available science. And this was delivered, as you say, like late last year. And I think for the RSPCA and other organisations, we were delighted to see the outcome of this research project and of this independent report, because what it did show was that although it hadn't looked specifically at breed as a factor in dog attacks, it did make mention of the fact that actually what appeared the most important in terms of dog attacks and that aggressive behaviour is human behaviour. So it's, human behaviour is a key factor in whether or not dogs are going to use aggressive behaviour. So for us, that was a really, really important finding to come out of that. But what the report also did was highlight a number of other areas that really do need to be further looked at in terms of actually truly reducing dog attacks and promoting responsible dog ownership. So what we've now seen as a result of that report is the UK government setting up a number of different groups to look at some of the recommendations that came out of that report. So, for example, one of the big recommendations that came out was the need to make sure that we've got much, much better data than what we currently have around dog bites. So at the moment, there is no compulsion on people to actually report a dog bite. Typically, if you go to hospital for treatment because of a dog bite, that will normally get reported to the police, but otherwise that's not the case. One of the things to come out of the Middlesex report was that there really is that need to make sure that we've got much more accurate and comprehensive dog bite data. So that would be great to have something that comes out of that. And, you know, if we end up with some sort of database, that would be really helpful. I think the other, you know, one of the other areas that came out as well was that real need to make sure that the measures that we've got in place around dog attacks are actually evidence-based and, you know, truly preventative as well. So that's another area of work that the government will look at, and also education. Because as we've said, you know, education is absolutely key, not just for children, but for anyone that's going to come into contact with dogs. So there's a number of really important areas that have come out of that research. And I think, you know, what we are really hoping as the RSPCA, but I'm also talking as Secretariat, as the Anti-BSL Coalition in the UK as well, we really hope that this actually is going to be a vehicle for change for BSL. And what I would really hope is that as a result of all these different areas that are now being looked at, and hopefully recommendations that are put forward to the ministers within UK government, we will end up in a place where we have a legal framework for dog control that allows us to actually have a commitment from the UK government to repeal BSL in the future. You know, I think we cannot continue. We've had BSL in the UK for 30 years now. It'll be the 31st anniversary on August the 12th this year. And we just cannot continue with this legislation. We've obviously focused very much around the impact on people, but obviously as the RSPCA, we're hugely concerned about what the impact is on dogs through this piece of legislation. And I think, you know, there'll be people listening to the podcast that perhaps don't have a really good understanding of how it works in the UK. And here, in order for a dog to be considered a prohibited type of dog, it is whether or not they look closely or they look sufficiently close to a standard that describes what a prohibited type of dog should look like. So it's very much an appearance-based piece of legislation. It doesn't take into account genetics, DNA, or parentage. So you can have a dog that looks very much like a pit bull terrier or a Japanese Tosa or a feeler, but they will have no genetic makeup of those breeds or types of dog. Yet if they look sufficiently close enough to that standard, they will be labelled a prohibited type of dog. And in the case of the RSPCA and other rehoming organisations, if we get dogs that come into the society or into our centres that look like a prohibited type of dog and are then found to be a prohibited type of dog by a police officer, we are not allowed by law to rehome those dogs and they have to be euthanased. And in the last 5 years, we've had to euthanize over 300 dogs because of the way that they look, and despite the fact that their behaviour is very, very sound, and we would, with confidence, have rehomed those dogs as suitable family pets. So, you know, there's a whole ethical issue here around, you know, is it right that we are euthanizing dogs just because of how they look? But there's also other consequences for people that own these types of dogs who, you know, their dog has never done anything wrong, but the police have a suspicion that they may look like a prohibited type of dog. They're then seized and kennelled for extended periods of time. And we know that typically dogs don't cope well with kennelled environments. So there's a huge welfare and ethical issue around this legislation as well, which is clearly an unintended consequence to a piece of legislation that was initially brought in to tackle a public safety problem. I think we have to now, and we can very confidently say now on the back of various bits of research, that it's not effectively protecting public safety, and it is without doubt harming dog welfare. And, you know, we have to ensure that we have legislation that is evidence-based, and that does not mean BSL, it means something that is breed neutral in approach instead.
Yeah, and hopefully change is needed because the real problems, the real causes are not addressed in the current strategy, because banning the existence of dogs based on their outlook itself will do nothing with all the other issues we talked about how to raise up a dog, how to train a dog, how to etc. We talked about all of these things, which really contributes to dog attacks and dangerous behavior of dogs. And I do hope this report will be properly used by the government and there will be change. And I think it is a very valuable material for anyone who is interested in this topic to see the nature of let's say, dangerous breeds. Because okay, it is based. This report is based on the situation and the legal environment of the UK, but human nature and dog nature are the same more or less everywhere, or you can easily adapt. And besides the current regulation and the general dog keeping habits, there is one uh, uh, topic I would really like to talk about from this aspect, the aspect of dog attacks and dangerous breeds and behavioral problems, is the situation caused by the COVID pandemic. Because I think if we don't handle the so-called COVID dogs properly, that would lead to further problems, also related to dog attacks. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we as the RSPCA, and I think the animal welfare sector as a whole in the UK was really worried about what the pandemic was going to mean for our population of dogs. And I think, we saw on an international scale a huge rise in interest around dog ownership, and in many cases we saw that translate to a large number of people getting new dogs into their family at that time. And I think it's fair to say that there was probably a lot of people that it was the right time for them to bring dogs into their family, but we are certainly finding now that there are individuals out there that probably very much regret that decision. And it was compounded, I guess, very much as well by a number of other issues, in that certainly in the UK, the demand for puppies was so great that we were unable to match that immediately. And what we then saw was unscrupulous individuals outside of the UK breeding puppies in conditions that are very much low welfare, high volume, transporting them into the UK, which, as we've mentioned, we've then got pups that haven't been bred properly, haven't been reared properly, transported in very stressful conditions, coming into the UK at a time where we had a whole series of lockdowns that then ultimately impacts upon the ability for puppies to undergo adequate and appropriate socialisation and habituation. So we've had a whole population and generation of pups that have had limited exposure and experience to what is necessary to make sure that dogs do grow up to be well-rounded, confident, happy individuals. And I think we're seeing that now to some extent, because we're seeing, unfortunately, larger numbers of dogs being relinquished into centres. We've got large numbers of behaviourists saying that they are, being contacted on a regular basis for people that really need help because of that lack of socialisation. And so we had, unfortunately, I guess, very much a perfect storm, in that we had, as we were saying, puppies coming in that hadn't been bred and reared properly, couldn't be socialised and habituated. We had, I guess, an impact on the veterinary profession and the behaviour profession. And undoubtedly that's going to have an impact on the dog's behaviour. And so last year, the data that we have available through our National Health Service that reports on the number of people that have had to go into hospital for dog bites, we did see another increase. Now, it's fair to say that year on year, typically we see an increase in the number of people that need treatment for dog bites anyway. So that in itself wasn't that surprising. But I guess, we might have expected to see a lower number, just given the fact that we were all under lockdown for such a great period of time. But, I think we can definitely say that probably what we were seeing was that in some situations, because people were at home, we had dogs with their family around them all of the time that many dogs wouldn't be used to. And some may end up in situations that, those interactions that perhaps wouldn't happen were happening, that could potentially have led to dog bites. And also this population of dogs who sadly, through a whole series of different events, just haven't had the appropriate upbringing and owned by people that wouldn't necessarily have a good understanding around behaviour, because for them it may have been very much an impulse purchase, which is not, certainly not what the RSPCA or anyone would ever advocate in terms of entering into dog ownership. It's about making sure you're going in fully informed and knowing exactly what you need to do as an owner to responsibly care for that animal.
Yeah, that's what was my fear, that Yeah, I mean, the pandemic was not an easy situation for anyone, and it really triggered very complex dog welfare issues, and probably the behavioral problems is one of the biggest due to the lack of socialization in many cases, and impulsive purchase, as you said. Hopefully people will have more conscious thinking about what to do, how to do in the future, and I do hope that animal welfare organizations worldwide will find a proper solution to handle the life of these dogs, because it is a huge issue, a huge problem. And if we add the topic of dog attacks leading back to behavioral problems of the dogs and the human, as you said, as what the report found, I think finding the solution, it is always vital to find the real cause and to target the real cause, not with just legislative measures, but with really effective solutions, encouraging the dog keeping community to educate them, etc., etc. Because complex topics cannot be solved with one simple solution. That is what I usually say. And I do thank you for accepting my invitation, just to give, I know we could talk about this topic for another 3 hours probably, because it's such a huge topic. But I do thank you for being my guest today at this episode. And I do hope we could give a really detailed information package how complex this topic is and how complex the solution itself is, because it is important to tackle this problems related to dog attacks and banning on certain breeds due to our own bias and perceptive, I don't know, discrimination. Not us, but the lawmakers. So thank you so much again, Sam, for accepting this invitation.
And thank you ever so much for the opportunity to discuss it with you as well. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.